This video will show Java classes extending an abstract class and implementing an interface or a couple interfaces. So, create a Java, just give me a main, and we'll call it abstract class and interface. So, back in the day, I did a bunch of Java GUI programming. It started with AWT, which was Abstract Window Toolkit or something like that, and then it was Java Swing. And that's a pretty good example of extending. They had some classes in there that you had to extend an abstract class and implement interfaces. So I'm going to mimic that here. So I'm going to begin by creating a canvas. And I'm going to hand wave at a lot of things. All right. And a canvas is going to have a method. One of the methods it's going to have is public void add GUI component. And it's going to take a GUI component. And what it's going to do is, this is where I'm going to hand wave. It's going to add it to the list of components that calls this. Okay. So now we need a GUI component. And a GUI component is going to be an abstract class that other things extend to be a GUI component. And a GUI component is going to have its location, so we need to set that, do that in a constructor. And it is going to have public abstract method void paint. And whoever implements this is going to have, or extends this class, is going to have to implement this method so that it can paint itself. Oh, by the way, we have an abstract method here, and we got a compiler error that says, hey, you also have to declare the class to be abstract. All right, nobody can instantiate this class. Whoever extends it has to implement paint, and then you can instantiate that class. So we have a GUI component and with an abstract method paint. Let's create a component to add to the canvas. How about a tree? It's going to extend GUI component. It's going to need a constructor to set its X and Y position when it's created, but it's also going to have to implement the abstract method. All right, so now it implements the abstract method, and it would write code here to paint itself. Paint a tree. Okay. Now, let's go ahead in main. Let's new up the canvas. Believe me, we used to write code like this. And a tree. And let's place the tree somewhere near, well, wherever 4555 means. And then canvas, let's add the tree. Okay, there we go. We have a canvas. We have a GUI component tree that knows how to paint itself, and we added it to the canvas. So then when somebody shows the GUI, there's the tree. That's fine, but what we want to do now is we want to add a button, and when the button's clicked, do something with the tree. So we're going to we're going to declare an interface. Whoa, not that one. Event producer. An event producer is something that produces an event. And what an event producer needs is event consumers will add themselves to the event producer, and then they'll get notified when an event happens. So let's make this an interface. So add event listener, event listener. And what would happen with, oh, this is an interface, so we just, there we go. The interface, whoever implements this interface is going to implement this method so that other components can add themselves to it to be an event listener. So where we're going with this is the tree is going to be an event listener on a button. So when the button clicks, the tree is going to do something. Alrighty, so we need a button to add to the GUI. And it's going to extend the GUI component. So it needs to know where to be placed, and it needs to know how to paint itself. So in here it would have code to paint a button. Okay, great. But a button is also going to be an implement event producer because it's going to produce some events. So we need to do that. So since it's an event producer, it needs to keep track of the event listeners. And so when somebody calls this add event listener, it will just add the listener to the list of listeners. And then when this button does something, like somebody clicks it, it'll go through its event listeners and it'll call the method so that they'll know that the button did something. What we need now is an event. And this is just a class that has the info about the event. Now we're going to do an interface called event listener. And this is going to be an interface. And if you implement this, you need to implement the method action. All right. So you implement this method, and then you're going to implement the action event, and that'll be called when the event producer does something. So when somebody clicks a button, this event will be called. So now let's go into tree and have tree impl. Oh, that's not the tree. Come on, where's the tree? Tree will implement event listener. So now we gotta, and in here, so when the button gets clicked and it calls this method, it'll do something like shake the tree and drop. canvas or whatever it wants to do when the button's click. So in main now, to tie it all together, we're going to create a button. And let's put the button at some position. Let's add the button to the canvas. And button add event listener tree. So now we're all wired together. So when the button's clicked, the tree has now added itself as a listener to the button. When the button's clicked, the button will go through all its listeners and call the action event. So on the tree, this action event will get called and it'll do something to the tree, like the comment there was shake the tree and drop the leaves. And that is an example of this abstract class with the abstract method paint, tree which extends the abstract class and implements the abstract method paint, also button that extends the abstract class and implements the method paint, event interface called event producer, which has a method add event listeners, which is a button. Button is an event producer. Button implements event producer, has the method add event listener, and whoever calls this just gets added to the list of listeners for the button. The tree, then we have event listener interface, which says this is the method that's going to be called. Tree implements event listener, so it implements this method action. And when we wire it all together in main, we create a button, add it to the canvas, and then add the tree as an event listener on the button.